Brought to you by PrayLatin.com, makers of prayer cards featuring complete English phonetic renderings of Latin pronunciations. Yesterday I brought to you the story of a priest who had been doing literal criminal activity, or allegedly had been, and now was making national headlines. In fact, international headlines. And today we return to an unfortunate story, that of Father Marco Rupnik, who has clearly been protected by Pope Francis. If you aren't familiar with Father Rupnik, he is a now former Jesuit who was the head of an art institute in Rome, still runs that art institute in Rome. In fact, his artwork has adorned Catholic parishes for 25 years or longer. He has used his connections through the art community and in the church to gain quite a lot of wealth for himself and to gain the protection of his patronage in Rome. And unfortunately, his evil deeds that he has been credibly accused of doing have been gone largely unpunished. We now have more proof that he will probably never actually be punished. The deeds that he's been credibly accused of having done involve using his priestly faculties to absolve the sins of nuns whom he coerced into violating their vows with him, specifically regarding the 6th and 9th commandments. He engaged in sins of the flesh, we'll say, with them. I'm being very oblique about how I speak about this because it's horrifying to talk about nuns like this, but also because he coerced them into doing things involving implements used for the Mass, including the altar and chalice and things, that beyond what I've just said, I can't bring myself to say even in private. They're so evil. And he used his priestly faculties to absolve them of their sins involved in this that he committed with them. Canon law is rather explicit about the consequence for this: automatic excommunication. And the Jesuits were too horrified to this, to the point where, to their very great credit, they expelled him from the order after going through their own investigation. It was determined that he excommunicated himself, but that excommunication was rescinded by Pope Francis in a very strange kind of story. He was restored to priestly activity and was incarnated in his home country, but then he spent most of his time in Rome since then at his art institute, continuing to make his weird, kind of creepy looking art that unfortunately adorns some of the highest profile places in the church. And there's been a debate ensuing since this has all gone down. Should Marco Rupnik's art be in the Fatima Shrine, the Shrine at Lourdes, the Knights of Columbus headquarters in the United States, and on and on and on, lots of different places? And mostly the Vatican has basically said, stop trying to cancel this priest. Cancel culture is bad. That's an odd response. They also say that they are in the process of investigating the priest, conducting their own investigation. And it has been going on for a year now. And the most recent update we got was, well, we haven't really found anything yet. This is inconclusive. We'll keep investigating. My expectation is they will keep investigating until people forget about this issue. So I was curious when it made the news that Cardinal Zuppi, one of the highest profile bishops in the church, okayed Father Marco Rupnik to finish painting some of his murals that are going to go into a rather high profile parish in the church in Italy. So we turn to a website called affaritaliani.it. It's an Italian news outlet with this headline: Cardinal Zuppi, yes to Rupnik's work in Bologna. The artist is accused of doing bad things with more than 20 nuns. The mosaic of the parish of Maria Regina Mundi will be finished, even if the former Jesuit who made it is under episcopal trial for physical and spiritual bad things on dozens of women. Yeah, so this is significant. Cardinal Zuppi's name is one that often appears near the top of lists of many men likely to follow Francis into the papacy and to continue his work. He is widely considered to be a top contender for a Pope Francis II. He has a grandfatherly demeanor about him. He radiates kindness and is absolutely 100% a Bergoglian through and through and should not be underestimated. The Cardinal has been getting serious international political chops that will make him a serious candidate in the next conclave by working for peace on behalf of the Vatican in Eastern Europe in that big conflict going on in that theater. He's also expressed openness and support to broadening the role of women in laity in the governing of the church. He's a smiling, more charismatic version of Francis that is far less prone to nasty outbursts. Keep an eye on him, especially now that he's greenlighting Father Rupnik's diabolical art to continue. In many ways, he reminds me of the candidate running on the Party of Moloch's ticket here in the United States for the number 2 position. That's who he reminds me of in a lot of ways. Let's turn to this article to get some details here about one of the people who could be Pope Francis II and how he's greenlit this case. And no, I'm not saying Zuppi will be, but he is on that list of people considered to be very serious contenders. So from the article, quote, Marco Rupnik is a theologian, spiritual leader, artist, and atelier founder who has been accused of doing bad things with about 20 nuns. They said they had suffered physical and spiritual violence from the artist while he was an assistant in the Loyola community in the 1990s. Although defended by the Pope himself, Rupnik was eventually expelled from the Jesuit order to which he belonged, but his works remained. They adorned dozens of churches, continued to be appreciated, and in some cases are still under construction. Like the mosaic in the parish of Maria Regini Mundi in Bologna, which is partly managed by the city's archbishop, none other than the cardinal and head of the Episcopal Church, Matteo Maria Zuppi. Inside the parish church there is a mosaic by Rupnik that is not yet finished, and it has been left as such since December 2nd. In recent days, however, it was decided to complete the work by adding a piece, always made by the hand of the former Jesuit monster. In most of the churches around the world where Rupnik has installed his mosaics, such as in Lourdes in France or in the United States, these works are being removed. In Italy, in Bologna, in Zuppi's city instead, the mosaic inspired, among other things, by the most sensual scenes of the Bible, those of the Song of Songs, is being completed. While the work is proceeding, the church in Bologna has remained, and still seems to be, closed in these first days of August, as the journalist Federica Torn reports in the newsletter and podcast Appunti di Stefano Feltri. But it is not mandatory to close a church for the installation of a mosaic. According to Torn, it seems rather they want to keep journalists and curious people away. Questions of security, the parish priest Don Francesco Bonanno told her, without adding anything else. In short, an environment of secrecy is the one in which they are proceeding with the completion of the work of which it is unlikely Cardinal Zuppi is not aware. End quote. So yes, those mosaics were left unfinished when the story really became too big to ignore anymore. And no, there's no possible way that Cardinal Zuppi, who is the local ordinary, could not be aware of this. He gave Father Rupnik the green light to finish this. Why is that? Well, it could very well be that he thinks Rupnik is actually innocent of the things said about him. It could be that he believes that you can separate the work of the artist from the evil deeds of the artist themselves, given that there are plenty of times in history where artists created masterpieces while the artist himself was less than savory. There's also a political answer to why this is. People are now positioning themselves to follow Francis. And it looks very much like you are seeing the politicking behind the scenes begin for being the successor of Francis. I've reported already on Cardinal Pietro Parolin, the Cardinal Secretary of State, being considered a frontrunner. Again, I am not saying he will be the next pope, but there are many saying he has possibly the best shot of following Francis into the papacy as a Francis II type of pope. Cardinal Zuppi could be doing this for political reasons as well, for the simple reason that the Jesuits control the Roman Curia. They are essentially the lifeblood in terms of staffing of the Roman Curia by all credible reports, that for decades, the reasons that John Paul II and Benedict XVI would be given reports about evil things going on in the United States in the church and in Europe in the church, and those reports would never make it to those popes because the Jesuits controlled the flow of information. They controlled most of the flow of everything in the Roman Curia. How exaggerated those reports are, I don't know. But the political answer here is that despite the Jesuits as an order doing the right thing, there are many true believers among the Jesuits who are, we'll say, spiritually on the side of Marco Rupnik, and that they would probably object to his art being removed. That's the political answer. I'm curious what you think is going on here. Do you think Rupnik will ever actually have to face the deeds, face consequences of the deeds he's committed. I'm curious what you have to say about this, so let me know in the comments, please. Like and subscribe if you haven't, it does help. So to sharing this on social media, that helps too. And if you've ever thought about supporting the work of Return to Tradition, there are links in the description box below or the join button below the screen. They greatly help keep these daily messages coming and is greatly appreciated. And as always, pray for the Church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.